Can you explain the process of how a student would receive OT services? Okay, so OT services, occupational therapy, for those of you who don't know what OT is. Occupational therapy services in public education or in special education is considered a related service in most of the eligibility categories. There are a few eligibility categories with regards to mobility, things like that, to where it's still a related service, so to speak, but it would have a larger role in the child's school day than, let's say, what is traditionally seen as occupational therapy services. First of all, you start off with the child's eligibility. A child has to be identified under one of the 13 recognized categories to where they have a qualifying disability and they're also need in specialized instruction. So you take that and you go, okay, you have our educational performance areas where a child is entitled to specialized instruction, and that is typically academics, social emotional development, including behavior, communication. With some kids, it is functional skills, independent living skills, things of that nature. And then transition skills when they get old enough, that would typically start around 14, 15, 16 years old, depending on your state. So these four, depending on your child's diagnostic history and where they're performing, academics, social emotional development, communication, functional skills, independent living skills, would look at that. These would be considered the educational performance areas. And an IEP team is supposed to look at that and go, okay, does the child require additional services, related services, that then connect back to help support the child to make progress in one of these areas? Okay, that's why they're called related services. They relate over to help support these four educational performance areas. So let's say occupational therapy, they'll do an evaluation, they'll look at sensory, they'll look at fine motor, gross motor skills, and they can even do a functional analysis or a functional assessment of the school's of the child's classroom setting. All right, you get a written report from the occupational therapist, and at that point, present the report to the IEP team with recommendations. There's some schools or there's some states that I see where the occupational therapist will provide their results, but won't have any written recommendations. And that's ridiculous, okay? Because how can a team make a decision unless there's written recommendations? And some crazy excuses I hear is that, that's up to the IEP team. Well, an IEP team can't consider those results unless they're written down. And I don't care if you verbalize them. That doesn't matter. I want them written down. Okay, they need to be written down because it's potential evidence to support you if, in fact, there's a disagreement and a lack of consensus on the team. So those recommendations need to be written down. Now, that's what's frustrating because people sit there and they cite the IEP team as the only one that truly makes those decisions. Fine, all right? But the OT can sit there and make these recommendations, and then the IEP team, with the parents as participating members, can look at those recommendations and go, okay, well, we believe instead of 3 times a month, 2 fits into the schedule, and I believe that would reflect, being able to help the child in these educational performance areas to where the child's going to make progress. Okay, that's the standard, and it's also to be used to habilitate or rehabilitate. Habilitate or rehabilitate a child's weaknesses in those areas: fine motor, gross motor, and sensory. Okay, and any kind of recommendations with regards to with regards to sensory, with regards to anything that your child may need in fine or gross motor, the school would need to provide, as long as those recommendations are reasonable. So let's say other kind of tools, sensory type of tools, handwriting, grips, things of that nature, squishy balls to sit there and help with sensory. The school would need to provide those things if they are reasonable recommendations, okay? At the end of the day, it's the IEP team that determines that based upon, like I said, the results of the evaluations and the recommendations. That's how your child is qualified, I guess. And I hate the word qualified because it's not really, your child doesn't have to qualify, so to speak, for a related service. The related service is there if not that there's some additional high standard that they would need to achieve. Okay, that's not how it works. We have our educational performance areas, and it's just merely a determination of whether or not these additional services, the related services, would help support and help the child make gains and make progress in their educational performance areas. That's the analysis. So I sort of don't like the word qualify for OT services or qualify for speech language services if it's a related service. Same thing with PT, same thing with behavior analytics, same things with counseling services. It doesn't matter. The definition is the same as a related service. Does it support over to help the educational performance areas?